Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, generating new technologies and tactics for reducing wildland firefighter deaths, property destruction, and all the other bad things that go with nasty wildfires. I'm here with Ryan Fogelman today. Ryan is the principal effort behind Fire Rover. I hope I'm not over understating there, but Fire Rover, yeah, what a great looking shirt too, I have to say.
Thank you.
So Fire Rover is a super cool concept that I learned about maybe 3 years ago when I met Ryan, and the idea is that why am I going to tell your idea? You know your idea better than I do. But this concept of like freestanding, robotic, blah blah blah. I'm not going to give it away. Go ahead, Ryan. What's
No,
Fire
feel
Rover?
free to give it away. You can tell everybody
All right,
about Fire
all
Rover.
right.
I'd be
So
more
so
interested.
recycling is a big deal, right? It's one of the key components of trying to reduce how much we screw up our planet. Uh, and
Correct.
and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes maybe it's a little oversold. I think I'm not sure that everything that they tell you is getting recycled is actually getting recycled. But in any case, lots of stuff does end up at recycling plants, and in many cases, it catches fire and it starts some really nasty fires. It's whether it's tire fires, battery fires, chemicals that shouldn't have been next to each other fires. So recycling centers often, unfortunately, burn, and they're pretty nasty burns because uh, there's a lot of different stuff in there. They're very unclean. You don't actually even know what's burning. So when fire departments have to respond to these fires, they don't know what's in the air, what's going to blow up. It's a pretty dicey situation. So the best thing for firefighters is don't be there. Right? And that goes, of course, for anybody else in the neighborhood. Put distance between yourself and anything that's dangerous. So Ryan's technology here is basically a robotic firefighter. It's a giant tank full of water that feeds up to a nozzle, and cameras monitor your recycling plant. And then, if they detect what looks like a fire, real humans monitor those cameras. And then they get on their little joystick and they play with the nozzle and they point the nozzle at the fire to try to put the fire out so people don't have to go there and risk their lives. And also, this, of course, being something that's right there on station all the time means that you get a response time, of seconds, not of minutes. Like they say, when seconds count, help is just minutes away. So sometimes, it's too late. Ryan, did I get any of that right?
You did it great. I mean, it was great being on your podcast, and I'll see you next week. So I'm just
Awesome.
kidding. It was no, you are 100% right. And again, I think the key element is, and we've cut our teeth on waste and recycling. So just to, waste and recycling really comprises of a number of different levels of, of businesses, different occupancies, right? So you have your traditional curbside that everybody knows about, and that recycling. But like the real recycling is not putting a pound of any commodity material inside a landfill and actually reusing it or recycling it, right? So you and I as the public, that's all we should care about. And so the real recycling is happening. And when I say real, I'm talking about like, like scrap metal yards, these yards that we see that have explosions and other things, and everybody says that that they're a hazard to their neighborhood, even though usually these facilities have been around for 100 years and everyone just moved around them and then they became a hazard to the neighborhood. But scrap
I mean, that
metal
doesn't
and
make them more
construction,
or less hazardous, right? It just means
100
you moved
people
into it
care.
and now you're right.
Well, and
Uh,
that's where so scrap and construction and demolition, and then your curbside is a big piece. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like that that 10% value of volume that we're working really hard to educate and really hard to get people to recycle properly. And then we also do a ton of battery recycling. I mean, as you can imagine, like we just finished a facility that is, I call it the Titanic. So I am calling it the unsinkable, the unsinkable facility. But
oh.
basically, it's in Missouri. We have 106 detection zones, right? We use thermal, smoke, and optical flame, and then we use our AI, right? It is AI, And then we have 57 nozzles, a 250,000-gallon tank, an inductor of
Wow.
an environmentally friendly wetting agent. And I mean, this facility is ready for the fire hazards that will come. And we literally just went live with that like in the last week. And so, you know, we're doing over 600 facilities across the world now, right? So we're in 5 countries, and you know, and it's all high hazard, not just waste and recycling, but we do, you know, we have definitely built a niche on waste and recycling facilities.
And I'm guessing when you say, that that's your niche, to me that suggests, or that actually your words where you said you're cutting your teeth on it. Usually, when you're cutting your teeth on something, that means that's your practice for something else. If I'm
Well,
reading between the lines here,
yeah,
so
sure.
it's right. Is it your niche, or is it like we're refining this technology within this market? And by the way, here's 20 other markets that this could be deployed in.
100%. So I always tell people we're in the fire industry, right? And this is where you and I started talking. And I mean, the reality is that like I'm in the fire industry. Like the reality of what Fire Rover is trying to do is we are trying to change the way the world fights fires. So the water, water, water approach that, you know, again, sprinkler systems are amazing. They're
Hmm.
life-saving
Right.
for high-rise buildings, for people's homes, for commercial and office. But when you have outdoor or indoor large high ceilings, a lot of line of sight, that like our early detection and remotely operated with a human, and I appreciate you saying that because a lot of people just don't get it. You know, with our human agents will look and respond, and they don't just shoot a fire, right? They're actually doing a lot of different things, right? They're calling the fire department, they're shooting collateral assets. When we're dealing with lithium ion battery fires, it's really breaking the chain. It's not necessarily spraying the fire. There's times that we are fog spraying versus straight streaming. There are times when we are protecting collateral assets or ensuring that we're not shooting when a person is actually in the way, or when the fire professionals come. So it really is a comprehensive. FM has classified us as the first smart monitor. You know,
Wow.
and in 8.5 years later, we're in the final process of FM certification for our continuous flow solution. So the continuous flow removes the box and just allows, you know, using the sprinkler system water or the water infrastructure. And that's what I was just telling you about the facility that we just finished. But we have about 75 of those facilities across the globe that don't use our box anymore, right? They're using you know, really the 250,000-gallon tank, or they're getting water from the, you know, with the fire pump and all the different pressures. You know, so the reality is that I am trying to get everyone in the world to understand that I'm not fighting my fighters with water only. I'm doing, like you
Right.
said, early detection, and benefits are I'm using 1,000 gallons, I'm using 10,000 gallons, I'm not using 1 million gallons of water. I'm not, you know, I'm not dealing with the fire water issues. I'm not dealing with the cleanup issues and the business interruption issues. So the reality is that I do believe waste and recycling's, you know, and again, we have some customers that learned with us, right? Like when we first
Yeah.
brought this out, right? Like just like any other entrepreneur, like we had no idea if this was going to work. Now, did we think it was going to work? Sure. Were we 100%? No. And did a lot of people invest in us? But they knew what they were doing. And, you know, we learned, and good, bad, and ugly, you know, you're basically dealing with fires, and they are good, bad, and ugly, right? So it is definitely not as easy as, hey, see a fire, spray it, and be done.
Right.
But what I will say is that we are not an AI system. And unfortunately, the AI systems, the issues that they have is they have to dumb down their system. So we are putting out we are looking at every single needle in a haystack or every single piece of hay in a haystack to find the needle. And then out of those, we're looking at that, and we're looking at our performance, where most of the time you have to dumb down your system, which what that means in practicality is looking at a higher threshold of heat or a higher threshold of smoke, because you can't have a false alarm, because then you have a false spray. We've never had a false spray, and we've never had a catastrophic loss start in an area that we protect.
That is phenomenal. Let me quick side question: is your camera on one of those monitors? Because it's
Always.
moving around a lot.
Well, yeah. So our cameras will do a 90
No,
degree angle.
your camera right now
Oh, is it
is
moving around? It's
bouncing,
it's
and I'm
it's
wondering if
actually it I'm sitting in my couch in my office, and or, you know, my
oh,
wife
okay. All
My
right.
wife has she has all of these like really expensive books that no one opens on our coffee tables. They're coffee table
Right.
books. So I'm actually have two of those propped up with my thing. So I'm sorry if I'm moving, but
Okay, no worries. I
that's my
just didn't want to
passion,
do
you know?
disrespect to your logo on your shirt there
Ah,
by
it's
having
fine.
it come in and out of frame. Um,
Uh,
that looks good. All right.
I'm on
So
I just can't talk.
yeah, now you can talk, of course, and you should talk because you're really excited about what you're doing, and I'm excited about what you're doing. I hope that's coming through. Uh, because it's really novel, it's innovative, it's necessary, it saves lives. It certainly saves a lot of air pollution. It's efficient on water. Uh, like just good things. Hopefully, it's good for the investors too. You mentioned them, and that's rare in the tech talks. Tell me a little bit about your journey there, because getting products to market takes money, just like they said in what was that in the right stuff? What makes rockets go up? Bucks. Right?
Yeah,
No bucks,
no,
no
I
Buck Rogers. So how
and
did you raise money for this idea?
so I didn't personally, right? So I didn't, I'm not an inventor. But Brad Gladstone, Pete Mary, and Jeremy Dusing, like they developed this concept, got the patent on it. I was the first employee that was brought in to help them.
Okay.
So, and again, I also I mean, as I'm a pretty passionate entrepreneur. So, I've been working on another company called Cohatch that, we have 40 locations across the country and, we have a ton of entrepreneurs. So really, the idea of the journey was we got involved in this, we had a great idea, or we being the inventors. But really, it's like, how do you drive awareness? How do you drive eyeballs? And how do you know it's going to work? And the investors that I was referring to were the like our customers, right? We're protecting 9 of the top 10 waste and recycling operators, and they actually had to put their money where our mouth was, right? So fortunately, they had an issue, and we had a couple really really amazing partners who said, hey, we're going to buy this, and we hope it's going to work, and if it doesn't, we'll basically eat it. But yeah, we are fortunately, I mean, I'm a partner in the business, and we are, we have a less than 10 investors, and we've been self-funding this from the very beginning. Brad did the initial funding, and then, we had one round, one seed round. And then besides that, I mean, we really, kind of kept the business small, which has been good because again, I think from an investment perspective, you always want to have more control with with the managing partners, which I am not one for Fire Rover, but I am, our head of sales, and it's a I mean, you wear a lot of hats in a smaller industry. So what's been really nice is sales and marketing has been a very small investment, but it has been a very large, part of what I personally do and what my partner does. But my partner being Lindsay Sharg, um, but like, with a lot of businesses like yours, obviously, right? I mean, it takes a lot more money to get this thing started. So you really do need to go through the VC rounds and kind of get through everything. So, definitely have the respect for it. But, we've been fortunate in a Fire Rover perspective where we haven't had to do so.
Yeah. So tell me how is the journey? And I know, we think, in the fire break, like this is just like fire tech, fire policy, fire whatever. But, the reason that it's really important to explore this entrepreneurial journey with some of our guests is because the fire service doesn't invent the tools that they use. Everything that you see in a firefighter's hand, was developed by a vendor. Now, very often the vendor is working in cooperation with firefighters who use that tool, but getting new technology and new capabilities into the hands of the fire service or those who have to retard fire, even if it's right, private or business owners or whatever, like that comes from innovative vendors. And
100%.
any vendor, any innovator has been told like, great idea, let's see it when it gets to market. And if it doesn't get to market because there's not a fertile environment for that entrepreneur where they can get funding, where they can get endorsements, they can get letters of intent, they can get MOUs, if those things all don't come together, compelled by a good business plan and a creative product idea, that product will never see the light of day. And
Yeah. And
so,
I think you're right 100%. on the entrepreneurial journey of any product, right? I mean, I've brought consumer products to market. I've done a number of different, like, I've been doing this I'm 48 years old. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, but I think like you make an amazing point in the fire service industry specifically. And it's really, I don't know if it's just fire service or if it's just safety, but the reality is that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because, like we came up with this idea, right? And like said, okay, like, we're going to take this to market. And you think you get to the market and you think that you're going to have this warm hug of everybody saying, hey, you solved my problem. This is amazing. Like, how fast can I order these things? And the reality is you get mostly pushback, right? It's not NFPA certified, right? Like it's not written in any of the codes. Well, how could it be written in a code that takes 20 years to get into, on average, right? And like, how does it get into that code if you don't use it? Well, you can't use it unless you get in the code. Okay. Well, I think this works from a risk mitigation perspective. Okay, well, does my insurer agree with that? And you're like, well, I hope so, but then you go to the
How would
insurance
they know? It
companies,
doesn't exist yet, right?
right? Like, and so how many times have I sat in front of the insurance guys and I'm like, guys, like this works, this works, this works. And this is where what I was saying to you before, like the investors being your customers, I think that's really the most important thing, right? Like the MOU or like, it's, you really got to get someone who's supporting it. And I mean, the reality of fire protection across our country, I mean, you have 1.2 million firefighters, 700,000 of them are volunteers. We are dealing with a lithium ion battery problem that the entire world is waking up to. But really, from my perspective, waste and recycling has been the canary in the coal mine, for the lithium ion battery operation. So we were fortunate to ride that wave and build an expertise around that lithium ion battery piece. So, like, if it wasn't for that, I don't know that we'd be here today, right? And I don't know that, waste management and all the other, large waste and recycling companies out there would have really looked at our system, from a safety perspective and put it in. I think the reality is that when you look at what we do, we basically say, like, for most of my customers, I have billions of dollars worth of their property, plant, and equipment that we protect from catastrophic or any type of fire, right? Or any
Yeah.
downtime. So when you compare that against the insurance premiums and the amount of money that they pay for that, it's literally like less than 5% of what they would be paying from a premium. And that premium you have to pay every year, which ours is, an ongoing, but I mean, it allows a lot of these guys to mitigate their risk without insurers. And then the smaller guys still need those insurers. So just like, I mean, I always say in 8.5 years, or we're almost at 9 years, we are almost FM certified. It's taken almost a decade to get that. We've been written into appendices of NFPA codes, but NFPA will never say team wildfire is need use, right? For wildfires, right? They're going to say, well, you need to have this semi-autonomous, whatever definition that they described your system as, that you now need to now go to the market and say, hey guys, they were talking about us here. You know what I mean? Like, so it really, it comes down to you either have people who follow NFPA or you have people who believe that the best system out there should work and they should look at technology. And that one line, the should, look at other technology that is as good or better than the existing code. That alone has really helped us, but it has literally been a struggle from the very beginning. I mean, you build your businesses overnight over years, right? I mean, these are overnight successes that are built over years. And I mean, I've hit so many walls, and walls have not only hit me, but punched me right back in the face and knocked me down. And, we had to dig ourselves out and start over, right? And, fortunately, we got the patent. Fortunately, we're getting the proof. But the reason we get the proof and nobody else does is that I actually put out, I responded to 809 fire events last year, confirmed fire or hotspot events at my 500 facilities across the globe. And I never had a catastrophic loss that started in an area that we protect. If I didn't have all that data, then I don't know that I'd be sitting here today.
Very, very interesting. Let me ask you on a tech question, and this is you and me looking at something else. Um, uh, a friend of mine in Georgia has a nascent technology specifically for battery fires, because battery fires bring their own fuel and oxygen internally. So you can't really snuff the oxygen with water. And his concept is that battery fires, specifically the lithium ion ones, be attacked with a slurry of dry ice and liquid nitrogen, and that by reducing the battery temperature to minus 300, you can stop the reaction in its tracks. And he's tested that. And I'm wondering, do you think that's a technology that could integrate with what you're doing? Um,
I mean,
because
I
right
think
now,
it,
right, when you throw water on a battery fire, you're basically putting water as an insulative shield between that fire and what's around it. But the fire is going to burn until it's done. And
yeah,
in
no,
many
and I mean, you have to put you have to stop the chain, which means you have to make sure that there's no material that it can start another fire. No ember pops
right,
off, nothing else. And again, if you go to our YouTube page, the Fire Rover YouTube page, like, we share every video that my customers allow me to share, and we are on the
okay,
front lines of all these fires. So I mean, the only thing that I can say about, so I'm getting a battery MBA, which is we're constantly trying to learn. I'm part of a 62 cohort group, and I think there's been 250 people have actually gotten this. I don't want to call it a degree, but a certification, because
yeah,
really I'm trying to understand, like, this is full supply chain from digging it out of the ground to end of life, which what we're dealing with, and there's a lot of companies out there that are claiming that their suppressant or their way of stopping a fire is actually what is going to help with lithium ion batteries. And the issue that I have, and I mean, his idea, I think, makes sense, but I think it would make sense in line at the battery manufacturers or at the battery recyclers as part of equipment, where you
yeah,
have that kind of, I always call it the 0-1, right? Like, you have the on off, it's too hot, it's a problem, it's not hot enough, it's a problem, whatever you decide. We're looking at a macro view of everything and saying, okay, if any of this stuff goes wrong, or it's not segregated properly, or it's in its commodity stage, right, where you have black mass, or you're dealing with other types of hazards, like our system really focuses on that side of it.
yeah,
The only advice I can give to people who like claim that they have a suppression that works, like, when you test something, it works, right? But the
right,
reality is that when you have batteries that come over from overseas in Asia, and they put the batteries on the top deck, and if there's a fire in one of the shipping containers, they lift the shipping container and they drop it in the ocean, right? Because the reality is water doesn't work, but water works, right? Like, water, to your point, it doesn't work with a fire. It actually makes it worse on a battery fire. But if you soak it and allow it to burn out its material, then you end up, not having an issue that is the chain that is where you
you
get the
don't
real
lose the
big
whole ship
issues. 100%.
and all the
So,
rest of the cargo.
yeah, so the answer is, I'm not saying that his idea doesn't work. I just feel like there's so many people out there who make the claim that, there's all these fire extinguishers that are lithium ion battery fire extinguishers. But
Yep,
here's the problem, right? A fire extinguisher was created for you to escape a building, right? That's what they're for. They're not to stand above a fire, where the toxicologist, and, like, in this battery MBA, there's been very minimal studies, and there's more being done about the harmful effects of the gases that come off, the cobalt and
right.
the graphite and the lithium and all the different materials that are being used inside these things. So the reality is why would you give someone a battery fire extinguisher that you have to stand above and spray onto a battery,
Oh yeah,
right? I
when I say
mean,
fire extinguisher, in his case, I'm talking about
mm,
a 250 to 500 gallon tank plumbed into a nozzle that I was thinking, and I'll put you two together because like that's the
yeah,
purpose
we
of this
could.
podcast is right, bring the minds together because the intelligence is already out there. It's just not collaborated in many cases.
Mhm.
But this would basically give your operators, nozzle A or nozzle B option once they identify what's burning. And if they identify that what's burning is in fact, lithium ion batteries, they could go to nozzle B, which would then draw off the liquid nitrogen tank rather than draw off the water tank.
100%. I mean, and it's interesting you say that. Like, we're agnostic on what we put in our tank, or because if you think about it, most of the time with large, you don't with large, sprinkler system types, primary systems, you don't have an inductor of anything. You just use water. So the reality is that, like, I believe that water actually works well as long as you put it on, like, corrective correctively, and then also you make sure that you hit the collateral assets. Having that extra material, I think, helps. There are times we put gels. There are times that like
Yeah.
we have some hazards. I mean, we're doing a ton of hazard material. Like, I mean, if you can name it, we're dealing with, like, I mean, if you see our videos, like, so I think something like that might have a use in a specific, you know, like when people are doing rare earth metals, right? You don't know what metal you're dealing with, and you just have to be very so would this not have a reaction, and would it make sense to just fill our tank with this type of material, right? And again, I mean, I'm sure it's not as easy as that, but we're always looking for different types for different types of hazards. So I would
I
be
think,
happy to talk about
yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's as easy as that. It's if you have, and I love, okay, entrepreneurs are just tangent people, and they just follow some of the tangents further. Uh, but one
We're
idea
problem
is,
solvers.
you're right, is you've got a primary tank of water, which is your base carrier, and then you have supplemental tanks that are, tied into that through, um, eductor systems or dosimeters. And
Hmm.
then as you learn more about the fire, you can decide which additive you want to put into the water, at what correct dosing.
I
And
mean,
that
and
gives you
the
options.
only thing that I will say is that when we train our folks, right,
Yeah,
like we have to do everything we can to keep it as simple as possible.
sure.
Only because, and like a lot of times in MSW facilities and transfer stations, I mean, we're spraying material that is made up of a ton of different types of hazards. So I know there's
Yes,
a toxicologist that's going out now and looking at the different occupancies and waste and recycling and looking at the typical types of hazards that are in. But I mean, the reality, I mean, people throw away bodies, right? People throw away like gasoline and pool chemicals. And like, I mean, if you name it, it's been thrown away. Now, it's also been recycled, which makes like doesn't make a lot of sense to someone like me or you. I would hope, like, but I mean, everyone does everything they can to confuse a consumer, right? Like, I have an Apple like iPod, right? I don't want to throw it away because I'm like, there's a value there, but in reality, you don't put it in your recycling bin because you need paper and cardboard. So like, the reality is for our agents, what we're trying to do is make it so they have the least amount of decisions to make, because at every single one of our facilities, you have a communication protocol that is kind of stepped up. So like, for instance, when we do waste to energy facilities, like the goal is not to hit the grapple, right? I mean, you hit the grapple, and now the grapple is the most dangerous thing that you can have, from a business, from a business interruption perspective, because this huge grapple that's the size of, a freaking helicopter, to fix that, you can't just order a new one, right? And, if you have to put your lubricants on and you have to rework it and refurb those, I mean, you can imagine the kind of the pain that goes into it. So like on those
yeah,
types of events, it's like make sure not to spray the grapple, right? So there's times we have fires, people are like, well, why didn't you spray faster? I'm like, the grapple was in the way. We waited, right? There was a human being. We waited, we stopped, we turned off, we did. So, again, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't love your idea. I think it'd be great, but I think the problem is that a lot of times in this specific occupancy, we really don't understand what we're fighting until after it's done. And a lot of times you don't even know even after it's done.
right. Yeah. Well, you talked about fog nozzles being one of your options.
Hmm.
Do you ever periodically pre-fog an area with a retardant, like a
We
Fortress or a Citratec or something like that, that would
not yet.
reduce the
I mean, we
flammability?
could. Yeah, we could. I mean, I think it's like one of those things like hangars, right? Airplane hangars. I mean, they've changed 409. You don't need 30,000 gallons of foam to fill up a container, but I still haven't done a hangar yet because, I mean, I don't know why. Maybe I'm a bad salesperson, or maybe I'm just not in front of the right people, but like literally every hangar in the world should have our system, which costs a fraction of what a 30,000 gallon deluge system would. And by the way, like, I'm not hitting accidentally inside the plane. I'm not hitting the engine unless the engine's on fire, right? Like,
Right.
so the reality is like I'm looking at you now, going, okay, if I could shoot a Fire Rover over your shoulder into your engine, if God forbid it lit, but so there's like, I really truly believe, to your point, like we are a fire product and we have a fire protection technology and a skin that lays over that no one else in the world has, and it's because we have a patent around it. And, I'm open to anyone calling me or reaching out and saying, hey, we're doing this thing that's, I mean, a giant ball that's a human, and this is a real thing. Like, it's a giant sphere that has a city inside of it that some tech company might be building, and they really want us to use nozzles and cameras because the sprinkler heads are going to be way too heavy for the glass dome that they're building, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are the things that we can think through, and we love doing them. I'm working right
Isn't it
now on
fun
a
when people bring you in a novel new project and you get to be a part of it?
it's the best, right? Like, and again, I mean, we've had government stuff that's come through that I can't talk about, but like the one thing that I can talk about that we are working on, and I'm in my third final phase of this, but we're doing one of the largest paper recyclers in the country, or paper manufacturers in the country or the world for that matter. We're doing a fire watch unit that will literally replace the human fire watch for, with a Fire Rover and with suppression on a mobile unit. So this will be like on the back of a Cushman. So I mean, again, I'm pretty excited about that. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that need it. And again, you don't replace both humans that need to be there for Firewatch, but you
Right.
get your permit and then you replace one of the humans, and you have 24-hour watch after, and you're not worried they're falling asleep. You're not worried that, that they don't know what to spray, or they get nervous and run out, right? I mean, we kind of, there's certain places that robots make more sense, right? So
A lot
I
of
feel like
places,
this is
right?
one of them.
I mean, yeah, where firefighters die because we're sending men to do a robot's job.
Well, and that's
Uh,
where, again, my biggest pet peeve outside of the fire extinguisher is that the only people getting hurt in waste and recycling facility fires, and I share this in my annual report that I'm putting out March 12th of this year. But people, the firefighters are the ones, and who are getting hurt, and the ones who have deaths, right? So, and it's proportionately sized to, usually it's not the employees, and that's awesome, but the reality is it's the firefighters, and the firefighters don't need to be fighting these fires. So unfortunately, the competition to my system is to have a fire brigade that is an informal fire brigade that's not trained and shouldn't be doing it. But unfortunately, a lot of our customers or our clients have to do things like this because the fire department doesn't have the equipment or the training to do it themselves. So there's just a disconnect where we need the government to help either educate the firefighters, give them the proper equipment to fight these fires, or work with us to, ensure that our systems are out there, because you got to do something to stop the firefighters from getting hurt. It doesn't make any sense. And, these guys deserve to go home to their families just like all of us, right?
that's right. Yeah, I read a report. Oh, I lost your image. No worries, we'll keep talking. Some people are just listening, not watching anyway. So I read a report yesterday by Alex Heron out of Fort Collins. He said that what determined whether uh, a fire took down your home or not was less influenced by what your home was made out of and more influenced by whether firefighters thought that they could attack it without getting hurt. And if they don't think they could attack it without getting hurt, they simply don't attack it, right? They can move on. There's other things they could do that are safer. Uh,
100%.
so so I imagine it's it's a similar situation with these fires, right? If you don't know what's burning, if you don't know that if it's going to explode in your face or what the consequences of trying to attack it are, you're going to let it burn.
Well, and that's where I think, a lot of firefighters come into these facilities, and like they don't want to fight a fire that they have all different materials, the piles are different sizes, all the different things that are happening. So, the reality is that most firefighters are going to come out and they're not going to fight your fire for you, but it doesn't mean that your employees are the solution unless they're properly trained and unless they have the proper equipment. So
Right.
there really is a disconnect on that middle area. It's like, how do you deal with that? Like it's hard, and it's a big problem, and it needs, really big solutions for this.
Yeah. And when you talked about replacing that Firewatch person at the paper factory, for those who might have the objection, robots are taking our jobs. It's not taking a job. It's just relocating that job. It's taking that human from standing right there where they're going to be impacted by the fire and moving that job over to someone who's going to be watching that fire on a monitor, in a remote, safe location. Is that right?
Well, yeah, and that's where, I mean, again, we're fighting it from another state, right? So, I mean, I think
Right.
the reality is that, we work with the fire department. I'd say less than 30 times in the last 8.5 years, we've needed the fire department to come in and spray any water, right? Because most of
Oh,
the time
wow.
they come in and they're just making sure that everything's and we put out a 3,000-degree rubber fire in 4.5 minutes using 60% of our tank. We still had 40% left of our tank. The fire was out in 4.5 minutes. It was a deep-seated fire. And the fire department didn't arrive till 12 minutes later. So, again, it is a game changer of having our solution, putting the material pre-wetting and, the material before, anyone comes in to really start to prepare outside of what they would normally do, where the fire department comes 15 minutes later, they roll out their hoses, they get everything going. And at the end of the day, they're there to protect the public. They are not there. I mean, they always say that, like, when the firefighters come, you're giving them the title of your building, and really you're giving the title of your building and your business.
Right. Right. No. And people have a lot of, I think, unfair expectations of people in the fire service, thinking that it's their obligation to put their lives at risk for your property. And it certainly is not. But
Well, and again, if you look at it in the U.S. versus like in Europe, a fire chief can actually go to jail for sending a firefighter in and allowing them to get hurt. Where in the U.S. you don't see that, so you do see more aggressive tactics, but that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Like,
no, not at
I mean, the
all.
reality is that, like, we want our firefighters to make it home, right? Like, you don't want to. I mean, it's a I mean, that's really probably the biggest problem. And again, they have to have the proper breathing equipment, because any of these hazards, as you know, right? Like, I mean, whether you're indoors or outdoors, there's a toxicologist that I was talking to that was talking about the train derailment. And he was basically saying that, the EPA was making a comment about there were frozen vegetables inside of a train car. And he's like, the frozen vegetables, the EPA basically said to, everybody around, they're like, oh, it's fine. It's just frozen vegetables that burn. And he's like, and again, I'm going to screw this up, but he's like, when you burn inside of a something and you have a carbonization of this and that, he's like, those frozen vegetables are actually worse than heptane being burned. And you're like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, there's just a lot more understanding and expertise. And, the reality is like, I understand that I'm an expert, but I'm only an expert because I want to learn from everybody what they think is correct and what they think is
Yes.
not correct. Entrepreneurs
Yep.
are here to solve problems, right? I mean, and again, I'm passionate about it because, look what we're doing, right? Like, I mean, the reason I'm passionate about what you do, I love it. You're putting basically a freaking jet engine on the back of like on the back of a truck and taking it out. And, again, you might still be using millions of gallons of water, but you're using, 10% of the, 15 million gallons of water that are needed on top of the chemicals and all the other things that you're doing. So it's like, there is a better way. And the problem's so big that it's like, it needs guys like you and I to go out there and basically, like, fight until, I mean, again, until they put me in the grave, right? So, and like, I believe that this way of fighting fires is better than water, 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 right? I'm not saying
Absolutely.
in your case, I think water, water, water is the best way. Now, how do you use the least amount of water, and how do you get it on faster and more powerful and create weather and all the different cool stuff you do? So it's,
We're having fun with that. Ryan's referring to the Team Wildfire technology where we're using jet engines to blow out fires. And
like the jet engine behind your
in
head.
full disclosure, I don't know if it's necessary or not, but Ryan actually invested in Team Wildfire, for
I
which
did.
you have my deep appreciation.
Listen,
So
I invested in you, not Team Wildfire. And, the reality is that, again, you have to have the passion and the perseverance. And again, I've always said this, and I say it all the time. And, we give about 2.3 million a year in scholarships to over 600 nonprofit, for-profit, and social startups through my company Cohatch. And the reality is that, like, I don't care what your background is. I don't care your color, your religion, your race, your creed. if you get up every day and you're passionate about something, you're going to be successful, or at least have the chance of being successful. Because I, I personally have had a lot of failures, right? Like I personally have been punched in the face a lot, right? But at a certain point, it's like, yeah, all of a sudden you push a product that people like and they're like, oh, so again, it took 30 years to get to a point where I was smart enough to know not to go, basically just work on, something that wasn't going to make a difference, and, being okay with that. But, if get up in the morning and if you have drive and you have passion, and, the reality is that, it will take hold, it's going to take years and years.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, we talked about ingredients in terms of, fire suppression, right? Whether it's water, wetting agents, mineral salts, liquid nitrogen, dry ice, whatever, right? You have a wide variety of options there. But to your point, Ryan, uh, what drives the success of any venture, any entrepreneurial venture, in my mind, are two things: curiosity and passion. If you bring those things together, it's a pretty unbeatable combination.
100%. And you know what? Anyone can have it. And it doesn't have to be changing the world's problems. It could be changing a locality's problems, or it could be making the best cupcakes, right? Like, again, get up every day, make the best cupcakes. Sooner or later, people are going to love your cupcakes, right? It just takes time. So, I mean, not to say that you're doing cupcakes,
That's
but
you're inspiring me there, Ryan, because I really like cupcakes.
well, that's good. We can do like the new Wolf brand of cupcakes is coming on the market soon. I might be passionate about that. You'd have to convince me though.
It seems like everybody and their brother has a new brand of coffee related around some cause lately. Uh, I think we're gonna make wildland firefighting cupcakes.
I mean, listen, I get it. I mean, we have Floor and Coffee. We have a maker space, that they started at 6 years ago. They now have their own building, and they're, doing well. And I mean, it's funny at NFPA, my first show for NFPA, where everybody told me I was putting firefighters' jobs out of business, and then it
Right,
literally took me like about 8 people to tell me
right,
that it
right,
wasn't true. But there was
right.
a
Because the job
firefighter
of the fire
coffee.
service is to provide employment, right? Not to put out fires.
Well,
Hello.
but what's nice is that there's firefighter coffee, that those guys are still around and they're killing it. And it was the first year, so this is like, that they created the branded fire coffee. I love it. So
So we're building machines that we're actually going to send into fires, and
yes,
hopefully we're going to send in the machines minus the people.
100%, or at least the least
So,
amount of
so why don't
people
we
in a
just put
safe
a
place.
giant thing like they spin the lotto balls in, full of coffee beans, put that on the front of the fire truck, and as it goes into the fire, the beans get roasted by the heat of the wildfire.
See, this is where they say there are bad ideas, and I think you just came up with the first one. I mean, I
But
do believe there's bad ideas. I listen, you can throw anything against the wall, but like I would say, I mean, again, unless there's a reason that you need to have like, the animals highly charged after they eat up all those coffee beans. But there's another issue
oh
we'll be
wow,
dealing with in California. I don't know. I mean, I'm just
yeah.
pragmatic.
Well, each batch has a unique flavor,
Yeah.
influenced by what type of trees were burning in that fire.
Well, I can't wait to see that. I'm not investing in that though. I just want you to know right
Okay,
now.
I will not ask you to.
I will buy a bag. Like,
All right, yeah,
you have a
no
commitment.
investment required, and most of the ideas we don't pursue, but
Right.
you know, which is good because right, you need focus and you need a certain intensity of effort on each idea that you want to land home. But at the same time, like you just can't, you don't stop generating them. You just stop following them all.
100%. And it's funny, in 2015, I had 16 clients, right? And then Fire Rover became a client, and then I mean I became the first employee, and Cohatch
Yeah,
started and now I'm down to like three, and I'm really good with three. So, it's I think
you're
you
down to
focus
three
for a
what?
long period.
Employees, clients.
No, no, no. I'm down to three businesses that I work with, right?
Okay.
Fire Rover, Cohatch, and really I have conversion development, which is more my consulting side. But I mean, the reality is that I spend most of my time really focused on the good ones that make it, and the other 16. I mean, there were. I had a product called the iPutter that had a like an optic on your putter, and we put it in Sky Mall, and it actually did really well, right? Like it
I
actually
remember it.
sold. Yeah, well, guess what? Sky Mall they went bankrupt and they never paid us. So, again, it was like, was it good enough idea to reinvest 100 grand? No, you know what I mean? But like we
Right.
kind of learned our lesson. But I mean, stuff like that happens. A lot of times it's not your fault.
So do you get pushback from investors or other people in your circle? Ryan, pick a lane. Are you doing Kohatch or are you doing Fire Rover? Because I don't think it can be effective doing both.
Yeah, I mean, I think people used to say that. I mean, I used to
Yeah,
argue with Brad, about he wanted me living in Detroit because he didn't believe remote work worked, right? And
right.
again, the one thing I can say is that, Kohatch has allowed me the flexibility to live my life locally with my kids and my family, and allowed me to go to sports meets, but it also allowed me to be very, very productive in building a startup like Fire Rover and Stick Grip, right? So like, I mean, I also, like you, right? Like, I mean, I don't work 40 hours. Like, I don't even understand what 40 hours means. I work, and then I want to say more like wellness and work, wellness. And like, wellness is my family. And, I do other stuff. I run, I do whatever you need to do to stay like, but I mean, I'm always working so that I'm never worried about getting back to work. But at the same time, I've integrated it in my life. And, I think, in a Kohatch side, I've seen so many folks who have joined. I mean, we have 8,000 members now across,
Wow.
5 states, and like they all work the same way that I do. And in 2008, it wasn't acceptable, right? Now it's actually acceptable, right? I mean, and there's tech guys and small businesses and startups and lawyers, and I mean, just you name it, right? Like there's all this dichotomy of different types of businesses that work together. But the one thing we do have, and I remember like our second location open, and I looked at my partner, Matt, and I said to him, I'm like, I have more access to resources in these four walls with all the small businesses than I did when I worked at Accenture. Because at Accenture, we had them. There were 75,000 people across the country at that point. I think there's a billion people now. I'm exaggerating. But the reality is that like, I couldn't find them. Well, here I just walked
Mm,
down and you're learning how to, like, I'm talking to people about like, hey, are you going to go do this volunteer event, or hey, you're going to go do this, something else, or we talk about business ideas, and like everybody has a business idea, as you can imagine, right? Like everyone's an
sure.
inventor, even though like being an inventor is really hard. But like, all those things can happen, and you still need that office time. But I don't
Yeah,
think you necessarily need the office time with everybody that you're working with that's only focused on your idea, right? You need the other ideas to get in and help, make you more creative. So,
that's right.
I think it's worked. The one thing I will tell you, and this is a little bit of bragging, but my daughter got into Miami University, like, so Miami of Ohio, and then
Congratulations, sir.
Will Schmidt called me and said, "Hey, did you hear Fire Rover was one of the top 50 fastest growing companies for the Miami Red Hawk 5, or 50?" And I'm like, "No, that's awesome." And then my other partner, Matt Davis from Kohatch, called me and he said, "Hey Ryan, did you hear that Kohatch was a Fast 50 for Miami?" And I'm like, so again, they were both Miami grads. I honestly like never really put two and two together. But so now I'm going to an event where both of our two different companies. So I think everybody knows how to work together. I spend most of my time on Fire Rover, right? Like building it as a day to day, more of like a job. But Kohatch is more of a lifestyle and a way of doing business. So that's how it's really worked out as well as it has.
Fascinating,
But
fascinating.
there's
And I
still
love
people out there
seeing,
unhappy.
the integration of ideas from disparate entities, because you never know who has a unique angle on your problem that you wouldn't find because you think of things one way and other people think of things the other way. And collaboration is really the key to liftoff.
100%. And I think, there's also, I've learned a lot from, and I've worked in every industry except healthcare. And it's funny because I'm working with a guy now who, he has a robot that does bedside manner, like, or bedside work, in hospitals, right? To kind of help replace the tech problem that we're having where you can't get techs, to
Yeah.
work floors. And, it's like, so you learn like from that, there's so many different things that I've learned about. And it's like, again, it doesn't necessarily relate, but you're it like you learn from all these other industries, and you're really solving the same types of problems, right? It might be TikTok, for a consumer product versus, my LinkedIn fire safety report for Fire Rover. But, the reality is that a lot of these channels are used in a lot of different businesses, no matter, where you classify yourself as the expert.
Yeah. And when people tell you, pick a lane, with that kind of, oh, I was going to say small-minded thinking, but that might insult the people who say it. But okay, they're talking from just a different experience set of working with people. But can you imagine if somebody had told Mr. Da Vinci, pick a lane? Are you an inventor or are you a painter?
Yeah, 100. And you know what? At the end of the day, what I really come to learn in my old age, right? I mean, is that you
Your
know,
old age at 48, huh?
well, I'm just saying, like, if the world was full of you and I, like, I mean, I don't know that it'd be a good world, right? Like, I mean,
No,
we need diversity. We need people who, work differently. We need all the different types of folks to solve the world's problems. So, like,
that's right.
trust me, I would not personally want to live in a world of all me. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, like, one of me is
No.
enough for myself.
Yeah, sometimes one of me is too much for myself.
It, that's kind of what I was getting at, but I was trying to be
Yeah,
nicer. But yeah, no,
yeah.
self-deprecating, yes. I mean, literally, I make myself crazy.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I do too. Ryan, we have got a lot to talk about, but we're coming up at the end of this segment. But I would love to have you back to talk more on fire, but also on the entrepreneurial side, because this is something where an area where you bring a tremendous expertise. Probably people don't know that you have your MBA and you have your attorney, and you've got a lot of creds under your belt, and you focus all of that intellectual capital, in very creative ways towards problem solving. So
Right.
I hope you'll join me back here on the fire break again.
What I would say is that I I could have a high school education for what I do on a daily basis, and all those things are nice. And again, you do have to learn. So I would agree. And listen, I would always be on your podcast anytime you call me. I'm happy to do it. Listen, it's very nice to know that there's people like me out there that are doing the same types of things that I am doing. Like I said, I don't want you and I to be the only people out there, but I appreciate the passion you have for what you're doing. I can't wait to drive one of these things. I hope I get to pilot it, and again, I'm okay with piloting it behind computers, like in one of those, the remote control centers. I don't necessarily want to be sitting inside one of the trucks, in the
No,
middle of
no, you
a
want to be in
forest
the
fire.
silo in Wyoming, right?
I just I don't know that you want me behind the wheel. Like, I think you need, that you use the pilots and let them handle it. But I mean, I
Yeah,
would like
and we
nothing
want to.
more
We
than to
actually
sit
want to
and
have the
do it.
machine ultimately driven by AI, making decisions about where the machine would be most effective at any given moment.
Totally understand. And you know what? AI is good, but the reality and what I've learned with Fire Rover is that sometimes you still have to have a human to be a smart monitor.
There you go. Absolutely, humans can. I say, artificial intelligence is no substitute for actual intelligence.
And that's where,
So
again, they can make our decisions better. I agree with that, right? If we start getting to a point where it's all AI at all times, and I mean, again, like, this is where I mean, this is the biggest differentiator between what we do, what our patents around, and how we do it. And it really is the human. It's funny because we just put out our dashboard of like the last 2 years of our data, and our so we have something that we look at where we basically, we're activating the system, which is bringing water to a nozzle, right? Whatever the solution is, it's water to a nozzle. We actually brought water to a nozzle 50 less times in 2023 than we did in 2022. And the reason we did that is because humans got smarter, right? The Fire Rover agents
oh,
got smarter and better, and they knew, because again, every time they do that, you don't want to just do it to be prepared, because then you have to purge the lines and all the other things that kind of go with it.
right.
So, sometimes not spraying is the best, the best answer, and not being prepared. I mean, again, we're always prepared, but just not over preparing, when
Yeah,
you know that things are false is helpful. So, I do hope that the human element stays as part of all of our society for as long as possible. I'm sure we're going to get to the point where we are, the Wally scenario, right?
right,
So,
right. And thank you for paraphrasing from War Games, right?
Yeah, I
sometimes the only
mean,
way to win is not to play.
so please listen to this if you believe that, at some point in time we're going to have complete desolation. But as I will say, Homer Simpson said it. We are the cause of and solution to all our problems. So I have faith in that.
More wisdom from Homer. Ryan, thanks so much for
Oh,
joining
thank
me
you.
on the show today. I really appreciate the time with you.
Anytime, Steve. Thank you so much. I appreciate, being part of it.
All right, folks. Well, Ryan Fogelman from Fire Rover, Cohatch, and probably other projects on the way. Fertile minds just can't stop sprouting good ideas. And, if you have the passion and curiosity like Ryan does, those things take growth. So you've been listening or hopefully watching The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. Look forward to joining you again next time, and we'll see you back here. Take care.